Hi and welcome to the latest on our series of tutorials on how to create a simple maze game in Stencyl. And in this video we are going to focus on adding a new actor type which is going to be an enemy character, and we're going to take a first look at events so that we can have a collision between the player and our enemy. So first thing we've got to do is go into our actor types here, and we need to create a new actor type. So I'm going to call this one enemy. So I'm just doing the same thing that we did before when we created the player one. We set up the actor type, and just like last time we're going to configure the physics of our character so that first of all it can't rotate. It looks a bit silly if it's rotating through the level. We don't want it affected by gravity, and then that's fine. The other thing that we're going to need to do is configure edit the groups, but in fact I'm going to show you what happens if we don't do that, just so you can see the importance of getting it right. So we'll come back to that later on. Let's go back to appearance, and we need to add an animation. And just like with the player, it doesn't have to be an animation. What we're talking about is just adding an image to represent this particular character. So I'm going to choose an image, and I've got an enemy robot character that I've created before, and this does happen to be an animated one. You can see the frames there, but yours doesn't have to be. My next job is to decide how this character is going to move, and we're going to go back into the behaviors that we've set up previously, that we've used before. So if I go to create a behavior to attach to this type, we've already got four-way movement, which is the one we're using with our player. And you can have various types of enemy movement, and part of your process of designing this game is to decide how you want movement to work. So for instance, in here you could have back and forth horizontally and vertically, so it could go on a very simple motion path, backwards and forth or up and down. You could have a motion path. That's how that works a lot of the time in games like Mario, where there's a specific route that a character will follow. And what we're going to use this time is follow target. So we're going to create an enemy that will actually follow a specific target, and in our case the target is going to be the player. So I'm going to click follow target, and then if you notice what it says here is this field is only available on actors placed inside a scene. Double click the actor in the scene and enable customization to configure this field. So this means we can't set up who it's going to follow until we've actually added this character to the scene itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that now. I'm going to go add to scene, and I'm going to choose level 1, and it'll load my level, and here's my character. I'm going to start him down here and just pop him in the corner, and then what I need to do with the select tool is I double click on the actor. I don't know if you saw that. I double clicked, and now a properties box appears for my enemy, and if I click customize, choose customize, and I've got it's already selected follow target. Now I can choose an actor, and in this case the actor I want it to follow is my player, which is obviously this character here, and you can see that he now appears. I can choose the speed, so I could make that faster or slower, and obviously you might want to experiment with speed, and later levels of your game could have characters that move faster. That's up to you to experiment with. And let's just see what that looks like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this game, and then I'm going to run it, and while I'm getting the game set up, I'm going to pause the video and we'll come back to see what the game looks like when it's working. Okay, now I'm previewing the game, and you can see that my enemy character does follow my player around the screen. Obviously this isn't an ideal method if there's a lot of scenery involved in a maze game, so you might want to consider whether this is an ideal movement type for you. But the problem we've got at the moment is that the collisions don't work properly, and indeed what we've got the ability for that to be pushed. So what we need to do is change the physics and the collisions on this so that we can have a proper collision with the robot. So let's come out of there and go back into our dashboard and set up, go back into our enemy, and this time in physics we don't want it to be able to be pushed, so we're going to select cannot be pushed, so that stops that happening. And then one of the other things we need to do is check the groups, because what we need it to be able to do is collide with the player. So I'm going to go edit groups, and on the right hand side you can see actors, doodads, players, regions, tiles. So actors, and at the moment they can collide with players, so that is set properly, so I can sort out my collision with those. Let's just check that works the other way around. So players can collide, there we go, with actors. So if you want to be able to have a collision event, so in other words something that happens in the game when there's a collision, you need to make sure that you've set your groups. So we've added our player to the level. It should work properly when we preview it again. The last thing I'm going to do is actually program the collision so that something happens when the robot hits our player. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into events this time. Now events is where we do the actual programming. So events mean that when something in programming like this means it's when something happens, do this, and that's a technique. Event-driven programming is what's used in game design a lot. So we're going to create, again, there are some built-in events that we can use, so you don't have to worry about this programming being too complex to start with. We're going to make a simple event. So we're going to go add event, and you can see I've got these are grouped into different sections, and what I actually want is a collision event. So my collision event is going to be a type and type collisions between type and type. So I'm going to choose this, and you can see that we've got a box now. Block comes up, this when actor type hits actor type, and I can configure that and then decide what I want to happen. So whatever will happen when the two actors collide, I need to put that inside this block. So you're probably familiar with this if you've ever done anything like Scratch. So if I double click on there, I want enemy. So when enemy hits a player, and then what I'm going to do is put something in those blocks. Now just what I'm going to do for the moment is just put a temporary thing in to show that it works, but I'm just going to go right click and place a block, and for the moment I'm just going to use advanced and exit game. So I'm just going to break out of the game just to show that this actually works, but obviously I'm going to change this later on. So exit game. So this basically means when an enemy hits a player, exit the game. Now a little tip, what you should always do is name your events, because you'll end up with quite a few of these. So I'm going to double click in there, and I'm going to call it enemy hits player, because that describes more accurately what that event actually is, and you'll find that very useful when you've got a big long list of events to help you remember which is which. So what I'm going to do now is preview the game, and again I'll pause the video while it's building the game, and then we'll have a look and see if that's worked. Okay, so let's run our game then, and we'll see what happens. And you can see that my guy's chasing, my robot's chasing my man, and if I get him cornered, there we go, there's a collision and the game exits. So what we've now got is pretty much a very, very simple but functional game. We've got a player that we can control, we've added an enemy that will follow the player, and if it collides with the player, the game will end. So what we need to start doing is adding some more sophisticated elements to that, like we're going to giving it a game over screen and working out how we can get the player to win the game. So those are coming up in our next videos.